Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel Airbus What's It Doing Now, and to this video from Safety Corner concerning inappropriate VS mode reversion. It's a real eye-opener, this one. It involves VS mode reversion during a go-around after performing an intercept from above procedure, the VS or FPA pre-selection function. Now, I took a look at this in the sim after reading the safety report by Airbus, of which I'll try and put a link into on this video, but you can get to this Airbus safety article in their Airbus safety app or online. You can read this as well as I can, but the aim is to sort of put a little bit of meat on the bone here. We recreated this in the video after having read the report, and it was a real surprise actually. I demonstrated this to the crew and we all just sat there and we were all surprised at one, what we were seeing, and two, how easy it was to fall into the trap, and thirdly, how under startle or high workload, if not trapped, and mitigated the event in these two scenarios could have had more serious consequences. We're all familiar with the ability to pre-select the vertical speed on the A320. I'll talk about the other types and what's planned for those types later on in the video. But whenever we're doing a non-precision approach, you can pre-select the MPA, or you can pre-select VS in anticipation from a glide slope from above. But what I hadn't quite appreciated is that sort of 45-second memory that the Autoflight system has, and if that's still current at the time of a mode intercept, then you have that mode reversion and it remembers that vertical speed. So I won't go into this in too much detail now, because of course we're going to come up to it a little bit more in the video. But yeah, I took this into the simulator and I showed this to the crew as a bit of a scenario, and it was very interesting indeed. So what we do here is we take a look at a case study, the event analysis and autoflight system behavior, vertical speed or FPA, the pre-selection. So that's the 45 seconds after pre-selecting it. The FCU remembers that. Of course, we have that in heading too, don't we? So we're all aware of that one. And we're familiar with FPA on non-precision approaches. So the thing to remember about this is VS or FPA, depending on which mode you're in at the time. So we'll take a look at one particular case study, then event analysis and autoflight system behavior. So a bit of tech behind it. Vertical speed or FPA pre-selection, the reason why we have the 45 seconds. And as I say, we're all familiar with that FPA for non-precision approaches, how we select 0.3 about a mile before. Again, that depends on your own SOP. Then after that, we take a look at 4 scenarios, not events. We'll talk about the events first. We'll take a look at 4 possible scenarios where this misbehavior may occur, and they're very interesting indeed. And then we'll take a look at some operational considerations and the importance of mode awareness. That's reading your FMA, and the importance of pilot monitoring. Lastly, we then take a look at some system enhancements, like I say, when it's planned for the different types. The scenario 1 that we take a look at, the 3 possible scenarios, if I remember rightly, where this might happen, is the intercept from above, a go around without star within 45 seconds of the VS pre-select. The second scenario is the pre-select of the VS but without actually selecting it. So here you've briefed from an intercept above, you've selected the vertical speed at whatever setting you prefer, or whatever rate you prefer, but actually you intercept the glide path and then you don't need it, but subsequently within that 45 seconds you do a go around. So we'll take a look at that. And the last scenario is again the pre-select of the VS and the loss of approach mode due to the loss of ILS signal or loss of flight plan or MMR failure. This is probably the least likely of the 3, but the common theme here is the pre-selection of the VS, whether you use it, pull it, or not. So let's have a read through of the event. I've got it here on my desktop. So again, guys, Airbus safety first. You can read this. You can download it as a PDF and follow through with me if you wish. But I've got some screenshots which I'll pull up here to give some figures which actually Airbus produce to help you follow through on it. So inappropriate VS target during autoflight mode reversion. The two cases of inappropriate VS target during autoflight reversion to VS mode after a go-around were recently reported to Airbus. So I'm just going to wet the whistle. In both cases, the inappropriate VS target results in a pitch down command of the autopilot with high thrust. Obviously, in this case, they were in toga. The flight guidance used the previously selected VS value set during the preceding ILS Glideslope Interception from above procedure target as the mode reversion. All this will become a little bit clear later on. This article describes one of these events in details and explains the conditions that cause this autoflight behaviour. It provides operational recommendations to flight crews to prevent and detect this situation. It also lists the system enhancements that were launched to avoid the use of the inappropriate VS or FPA target during mode reversion of the flight guidance. So some of these, by the time this article came out, I think it's fairly recent, may already have these enhancements. So do check your flight operations technical manual, any information that comes to you from your operations team as to the modifications that are available on your Airbus. That might come with an FMS update, FMS software, or it might come just as a package on its own. So anyway, this is the important thing here is just how easy it is to get into it and what we need to do in order to prevent it from happening. So in this event, and again, I've got these figures up here for you so you can look through the event as I talk through it. The A320 aircraft was descending towards its destination airport in IMC, and the flight crew were prepared for an ILS. Late clearance from air traffic control, well, we're all familiar with that, aren't we, meant that the aircraft was left high on the approach. The aircraft captured the localizer, but it was above the ILS glide slope, as in figure 1. At 3,500 feet, the aircraft was in open descent and lock with the autopilot flight director and auto thrust on. So they're obviously trying to intercept. This selected altitude was 3,000 feet and the speed brakes were fully deployed and the speed was selected at 174 knots. The flap configuration was config 2 and the landing gear was down. So if you like, actually, this is probably not the best way to approach an intercept from above. Arguably, we'd have had VS set by now, we'd have selected an altitude above, and we'd have hit VS. What this crew did, obviously, is they were cleared down to whatever it was, 3,000 feet, we'll look at later, and they just pulled open descent. But in any case, at section 2 here, or in this figure, at point 2, at approximately 3,400 feet, out star mode engaged, and pre-selected anything at this point. They've just come down, 3,000 feet was selected on the FCU. They're in open descent now to intercept from above or to get down to that cleared altitude. But at 3-4, obviously some way before 3,000 feet, out star mode engaged, as you would expect it to with this setting. At 3,200, the flight crew retracted the speed brakes and twice attempted to engage VS by pulling the VS FPA knob, but out star mode re-engaged 1 second after each, because it's in the out capture mode now, isn't it? At 3,000 feet, out mode engaged and the aircraft leveled off. This is why we do the intercept from above procedure, so that we don't level off. Okay, that's a real take home from here. The flight crew then pulled VS knob to engage vertical speed and selected the VS of 2,600 feet per minute on the FCU, and the aircraft then, of course, started to descend. At point 6, at approximately 2,300 feet Barrow, 1,600 feet on the rad-out, the aircraft was still too high on the glide slope as they intercept from above. Remember, they haven't changed to 3,000 feet at this point, and the flight crew pushed the thrust levers to toga to initiate the go-around with the autopilot engaged. So obviously they realised that part of the way down this approach, they were never going to recapture the glide path. And I suspect that was largely because they were too high in the first place. And secondly, wasn't helped by the fact that they levelled off at 3,000 feet. So the aircraft then started to climb towards 3,000 feet. Remember, that's where the last altitude set in the FCU window, and that was still selected in the FCU. The nav mode engaged shortly after, go around SRS nav at 0.7. The pilot flying moved the thrust levers back to the climb detent at approximately 2,700 feet. The outstar mode engaged at approximately 2,500. The flight crew immediately increased the altitude from 3,000 feet to 5,000 feet on the FCU. Now, as a result, the flight guidance reverted from outstar as they increased the altitude to 5,000 feet to vertical speed heading modes with the associated alerts. That would have been the flashing FDs, as well as a triple click sound to alert the crew there's been a mode reversion, white box in the FMA, and their flight directors flashing for 10 seconds, as I said. The aircraft then pitch began to decrease. It climbed to approximately 2,950 feet Barrow and then started to descend and accelerate at 2,800 feet. The aircraft vertical speed reached negative 2,600 feet per minute and remained constant until the flight crew manually took over by pulling the side stick. The aircraft reached 2,100 feet, 1,400 feet ran out and started to climb again. The flight crew later re-engaged the autopilot and successfully performed a second ILS. That's very similar to the event I recreated for the crew when we were in the simulator. It was a really fabulous exercise. It just reminds us just how fundamentally important and how useful simulator time is with the ability to be able to look at these things. So event analysis then. So reversion of the previously selected VS value, and this is the important take home here. When the flight crew increased the selected altitude from 3 to 5 on the FCU in step 9, outstar mode was engaged. This triggered the reversion to VS as per the normal flight guidance logic. Since the VS value was modified shortly before the go-around, i.e. within that 45 seconds, it was still in the memory and displayed on the FCU. This led the VS mode to be used as previously selected value instead of the current selected value of the current VS on the aircraft, which would have been a positive rate of climb, wouldn't it? It would have been, as they were climbing, once it got to outstar and they selected 5,000 feet, which would have presumably been their go-around, you would have had a vertical speed of whatever it might have been. But because the negative VS was pre-selected and memorised by the FCU, it was that the aircraft commanded. The flight crew reaction, it took more than 30 seconds from the mode reversion to VS minus 600 in step 9 and 24 seconds from the start of the pitch down for the flight crew to realise that the aircraft did not respond as expected. There's the startle, there's the mode awareness, there's the high workload that I mentioned earlier on. And it's not uncommon, is it, when we read about this thing, sometimes it can take up to 30 seconds for the brain to actually figure out what the heck is going on. And I don't know if you remember when I did the Hudson review, which actually I have yet to complete, apologies about that, when they looked at the simulator scenarios of when both engines failed and the airports that were available, what the human factors people failed to, what the airline failed to understand was that they didn't build in that sort of 30 seconds, what the heck is going on, brain freeze kind of time to allow the crew to establish what the heck was going on. And here you go, case in point here. It took more than 30 seconds for it to be realised by the crew. Good, okay, we'll talk about mitigation things a little bit later on. So taking a look at the Autoflight System behaviour, the event described above is due to a combination of two functions of the flight guidance system, VS or FPA selection function, and the reversion to the FVS and FPA modes. The vertical speed or FPA target pre-selection enables the flight crew to pre-select VS or FPA target to be prepared to activate the associated flight guidance mode when appropriate. We're all familiar with this, especially on non-precision approaches when we pre-select the -3 degrees and they put it just before we start the descent, or in the glide slope from above, as in this case. To do so, when the flight crew select VS or FPA target in the FCU, this pre-selected value is stored in the memory and remains displayed on the FCU for 45 seconds. It's 10 seconds on the 300, 310, 300, 600 aircraft to activate the guidance mode later. So on our aircraft, it's 45 seconds, but it's only 10 seconds on the 300. So you could argue that you're perhaps less exposed to it if you're on that aircraft, and that might be why there's no plan to actually change it. I've got a lovely coffee. Okay, information. The duration of the VS or FPA selected value stored in the memory was increased from 10 seconds to 45 seconds on the 320 family, 330, 40, 50 and 80. It enables the flight crew to pre-select an FPA value earlier while the aircraft flies towards a final descent point during an approach using FPA guidance in order to anticipate the engagement of FPA when the aircraft reaches the final descent point, as shown in figure 4 here. So it went from 10 seconds, and that was the nominal time for the fleet, but then increased to 45 seconds on our aircraft types, 330, 40, 50 and the 380, in order to enable more time for that pre-select. I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but as in everything, it's always a double-edged sword, isn't it? Mode reversion to VS or FPA modes. The flight guidance automatic mode reversion to VS or FPA modes is a logic designed to maintain the current aircraft trajectory. Yeah, I understand that. When the aircraft selection by the crew is inconsistent with the objectives of the current guidance mode. In the event described in this article, the reversion was triggered by changing the target altitude while the autopilot was in outstar altitude capture mode. FCOM, Autoflight, Flight Guidance, Autopilot, Flight Written Modes, VS, FPA mode provides all the conditions for reversion to VS or FPA modes. That's worth a read just to refresh your memory on it. But it's actually only when we see these events that we go into this stuff, really, isn't it? It's not something that on a Sunday afternoon you just pick up and think, I'm just going to read Autoflight flight guidance, unless you have a life course. But this is why this information comes to us, so we can all learn from it, and then we get some better understanding when we look at the FCOM. So an inappropriate combination. During the reversion to VS or FPA modes, the flight guidance VS or FPA target usually synchronizes with the current aircraft VS, as we would normally expect, or FPA, in order to maintain the aircraft trajectory. So like I said earlier on, if you were an outstart and then you selected the altitude up and your vertical speed was positive 1,500 feet a minute in that out capture, you change the altitude, you would expect the aircraft to then continue along that trajectory, assuming no previous FPA or VS had been selected. And that's the important take home. This inappropriate combination of VS or FPA presentation function with the mode reversion function may cause inappropriate behavior of the flight guidance, as seen in that previous example. The shorter time that the selected value on the 300 and 310 aircraft is stored in memory significantly reduces the probability of mode reversion to the selected value within 10 seconds after this selection. So the theory here is that you're less likely to. So actually, you're probably on the best fleet at this moment. So it doesn't suck to be you at all, does it? Several scenarios can lead to this inappropriate behaviour, but not all aircraft are concerned due to some differences in their guidance logic. So know the aircraft that you're on, guys and gals. So I think we've got enough information there to understand what happens, why it was designed, but we can see and what we'd expect the aircraft to do in normal circumstances after a mode reversion. But what we weren't, I would say, particularly aware of is what would happen in those same circumstances if we had pre-selected a vertical speed in the FCU, and that's exactly what happened in the case study. But it's not exclusive to that particular case, and so we look at some 3 scenarios, I think, from memory here, where the same thing could happen. So scenario 1, a go around during the glide slope from above procedure, 300, 310, 320 family aircraft only. Okay, so this is Airbus. What's it doing now? So it covers broadly the fleet. My experience is 320, so I'm focusing more on that. But as I say, there are some commonalities across the fleet. But this particularly concerns the 310 and the 320. The most common scenario where the flight crew may face this issue is a go-around during or after a glide slope intercept from above procedure, as in the example described earlier on. So 1, a VS value is pre-selected. 2, the VS mode engages. 3, the VS can be adjusted as you would do on a normal intercept from above. A go-around is then performed. And then 5, if the mode reversion happens within 45 seconds after the VS pre-selection or last modified, the inappropriate behaviour will occur. So just remember here, you don't have to trigger the vertical speed by increasing the altitude at out start, as was in this case, but actually if your out capture at out start occurs within 45 seconds, then scenario 1, as in this case, suggests that the mode reversion will still occur. So just bear in mind, you don't need to increase the altitude from outstart to trigger the VS. The VS will be triggered if the mode reversion to outstart occurs within 45 seconds of the vertical speed, as is shown here in scenario 1. So take a good look at that. So slightly different to the event that we've described, but the principle's still the same. Vertical speed minus 2000 in this figure occurring at outstar because it was what was selected in the FCU window within 45 seconds of outstart. The mode reversion occurs within 45 seconds, excuse me. Scenario 2, the go around after glide slope interception with a pre-selected VS without engagement of the VS mode. So this is a crew now that are prepared for it, but don't actually select it, don't pull it, but then go into a subsequent go around. So in this case, a negative VS value is pre-selected in anticipation of a glide slope from above procedure due to possible late ATC clearance. Here's a good crew here, briefing and anticipating an intercept from above. When clear for the approach, the flight crew presses the approach button, glide slope star mode engages, all looking good, followed by glide slope mode. A go around is performed in stage 3. 4, if a mode reversion happens less than 45 seconds after VS pre-selection, the pre-selected negative VS value is used. So just as in the previous example. All aircraft are concerned with this scenario except the 220 and the 350. Aircraft that are equipped with PRIM 14.1, I have no idea what that is, because the VS or FPA selected value is reset at go around engagement. Because the VS or FPA selected value is reset at go around engagement. What that value is, I don't know, so I'm not going to attempt to try and explain that one on the 220 and 350 aircraft. In scenario 3, this mode reversion is due to the loss of an approach mode. This is probably less likely, I think, because it assumes loss of the ILS signal. So glide slope or FLS glide slope, APDES or final approach mode disengagement due to the loss of ILS, MMR, loss of flight plan, etc. Lock or F-lock or nav mode disengagement, and the flight crew selects a target altitude higher than the actual altitude in the FCU in descent or open descent mode. In this case, the effect of the trajectory is generally limited due to an already descending trajectory, and it may be more difficult for the crew to actually detect this behaviour. So it's consistent with the profile, and because it is, because it's consistent with the profile, it might be more difficult to pick up because the trajectory largely doesn't change. I think that's what we're saying here. So a potentially hazardous one, but again, something which where the mode reversion occurs, but is a little bit more subtle because of the trajectory largely doesn't change. Scenario 4 talks about visual manual approach using the HUD. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know anything about it, and you can read this if you wish. We don't have a HUD. I don't know many airlines that operate with a HUD. Obviously, some do, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. So let's just move on then to some operational considerations, and then we'll take a look at the enhancements here, which I mentioned earlier on. So flight crews can identify an occurrence of an inappropriate VS target during autoflight mode reversion thanks to several cues. All right. First of all, we've got the aural and visual alerts. When you get a mode reversion, we hear a triple click except on the 300 and the 310. But largely, FDs will start flashing guidance mode boxing on the FMA triggers to attract attention to the flight crew, who can check the reversion parameters. So there's plenty going on there on the PFD, and one of Airbus golden rules is FMAs, isn't it? Know what mode you're in. So there should be enough there to alert the crew. It then moves on to saying, understand your FMA at all times. Careful monitoring and understanding of the FMA, as stated in the Airbus golden rule for pilots, I've just spoken about that, will enable the flight crew to detect the reversion to VS or FPA mode and detect any inappropriate VS or FPA target value. So FMAs, FMAs, FMAs. I think that's drilled into us, isn't it? But still, when we come across something that we don't expect, it really relies on our competencies, our spatial awareness, our Airbus golden rules to pick up what's happening, understand what's happening, process it, and then do something about it. And again, largely a lot of this can be briefed out, can't it? Once we know some of the pitfalls, if you like, of automation, and let's not be honest, over reliance on automation, and the importance of understanding what mode we're in will ultimately make us safer pilots. But this is just a brilliant example of just how the mode awareness is so vitally important. The effect on pitch. An unexpected pitch command by the autopilot can also be the sign of inappropriate VS or FPA target after mode reversion. Unexpected pitch or command by the autopilot can also be a sign of inappropriate target after a mode reversion. Note that in scenario 3 described above, which is a really dangerous one, mode reversion due to the loss of the approach mode, the unexpected autopilot pitch command may be limited and therefore difficult to perceive. So that way you lose the approach mode and then you just get basic mode. I think you probably just get heading as well as vertical speed, unless you maintain the localizer or the nav. But if you lose the vertical profile, it'll just revert to VS. You'll get the triple click and the mode awareness, mode change, and the flight director bars, but it'll then just go to VS. If you're not focusing on that, you'll feel nothing. So of the three, in terms of sort of SA and how the aircraft responds, that's really one to look out for. And there's a little box here, another little figure 9, which gives you the cues that the pilots can use to help them identify what's happening. There's cues of inappropriate vertical speed target during autoflight mode reversion. Click, 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 the triple click alert. Flight director bars flashing for 10 seconds to show you the mode reversion. Inappropriate VS or FPA on the FMAs, and unexpected autopilot pitch command. And again, a little asterisk there, as in scenario 3, the autopilot pitch command may be difficult to perceive in some situations. Little note here on the importance of pilot monitoring. I mean, we could go on for hours talking about the importance of pilot monitoring. The pilot monitoring plays an important role in detecting the issue and alerting the pilot flying when the pilot flying does not detect or respond to the inappropriate behaviour. So be very careful here with this, and you can't be stressed enough the importance of pilot monitoring and their role in monitoring, hence the name. It went from pilot non-flying, didn't it, to pilot monitoring for that very reason. Take action if things don't go as expected. Again, Airbus golden rule. Flight crew should take appropriate actions as per the Airbus golden rule. System enhancements. So enhancement 1, the reset of VS or FPA pre-selected value after VS or FPA mode engagement. So whenever a VS or FPA target is pre-selected in the FCU, the flight crew engages VS or FPA mode. The preset value is used for the guidance and is reset when the VS or FPA mode engages. It prevents the use of a pre-selected value in a subsequent reversion. And there's a little table here which talks about when that's planned for. Again, on all of these, the 300, 600 variant and the 310 not planned, because of course I think that's due largely to the fact that it only happened for 10 seconds in any case. So you may have slightly different SOP in how you perform your intercept procedures or your non-precision approach procedures. It'll be slightly different, I should imagine. Enhancement 2, the reset of VS or FPA selected value in a go-round engagement. This modification cancels any VS or FPA pre-selected value when the flight crew performs a go-round. I think that's a very important one. This prevents the use of inappropriate VS FPA if the value was not engaged before the go-round. So if you didn't select it before the go-round, it won't memorize it. And again, 320 sucks to be us. There's to be defined as to when, of course, that happens. And then reset the VS or FPA pre-selected or selected value in the case of a reversion. This enhancement ensures that the current VS or FPA is used during a mode reversion so that the trajectory is maintained. I think that's a really important one. And again, a table there to show when that is planned. So VS or FPA target pre-selection and mode reversion to VS or FPA are two useful functions of the flight guidance system. I think we can all understand that, how useful it is. However, in certain circumstances, their combination may create inappropriate behaviour of the flight guidance. System enhancements are available or will be made available on most of the concerned aircraft to prevent the inappropriate combination of the two functions. And as I say, there are 3 enhancements in progress there. The role of the pilot monitoring is especially important to support the pilot flying in detecting an inappropriate reversion to VS or FPA mode occurs. The warning to listen and look for the triple click, except on the 300 and 310. FD flashing and guidance mode boxing on the FMA. These cues get the attention of the flight crew, who can check the reversion parameters and take action if needed. And to understand the FMA at all times, take action if things don't go as expected, are the 2 Airbus golden rules for pilots that are very relevant to avoiding the effects of inappropriate VS during autoflight mode reversion and with anything basically that we do. Right, guys and girls, that's the article. Hopefully I've been able to expand a little bit on it and just give you a little bit more meat on the bone. I mean, a real eye-opener, this one. If you get a chance in your next recurrent simulator, or you can grab time in a sim, have a look at this and have a look at these scenarios. Take this report in with you and try and recreate them, and you see just how easy it is to occur. Great safety article written here by Airbus, and I think one which has real gravity and a procedure actually that we try and avoid, of course, because the intercept from above procedure is there, but of course if we can avoid doing it, all the better. But there are circumstances, environmental circumstances with ATC, topography, terrain, procedures, where the likelihood of an intercept from above is very relevant. and it needs to be briefed. But of course, with the knowledge now of as the time as we speak before these modifications are implemented, we need to take caution, because if we are going to execute a missed approach, a go around, within that magic 45 seconds of that pre-selection, whether it is pulled or not, there is a risk where at outstar a mode reversion occurs, or the mode reversion occurs, and the previous selected is memorized, and the change of the aircraft trajectory is performed, and it's at that point then that we need to take action. So understanding it and mitigating or preventing the threat is obviously the most important step, and that is trying to avoid the intercept from above procedure in itself. In itself, it is a perfectly safe maneuver, but just an understanding some of the limitations of the autoflight system, I think, is the big takeaway here, certainly for me. Right, okay, I think that's all I want to say today on this event. I hope you found it useful. Stay safe, keep the plate spinning, and I look forward to seeing you on another episode of Airbus What's It Doing Now in the very near future. Take care, see you again soon.